is over.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the studios in the wrestling capital of the South, it's another terrific episode of The Binge Buster Show. Please welcome your host, Tony Binge.
All right, everyone, welcome to The Binge Buster Show, coming to you this week right here in the studios, right outside the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina. I am excited. We finished up the month of November, and knocking out Starrcade. But in the month of December, we're going to be all over the board. We're going to be talking about all kind of stuff. The podcast this week, we're going to be talking Wrestle War 89. This was a show where Ricky Steamboat was the world champion, defending against Nature Boy Ric Flair. But before we get into that, I want to bring on my co-host this week. I'm talking about none other than Jeff Patton. Jeff, what is going on?
Not much, Tony. Just ready for an exciting night of the Binge Buster Show.
Man, it's going to be good. Last week was Thanksgiving. We had a double episode of the Binge Buster Show. We had an episode on Wednesday and another one on Thursday, Thanksgiving Day, talking Starrcade 85, The Gathering, and that was a really fun show. And it kind of funny, Jeff. We talked about that for a month. At the beginning of November, we both said, and Chris as well, said, definitely Starrcade 85 is the best. So we got to save that one for last. And we did. And lo and behold, the same week that we dropped our Starrcade 85, a lot of other podcasts talked about the same show. And a lot of people were posting Starrcade 85 matches on Facebook. So clearly, you and I and Chris are not the only ones to feel the same way about Starrcade 85.
The way it always is, Tony. They try to steal our gimmick, man.
That's gimmick infringement right there. So how was your Thanksgiving? Everything good? Your family and everything?
Oh yeah, real good. Ate too much like usual, and it was hard to move around after I was done, but I was able to work it off. So a few days afterwards. So. Yep,
that was the same case, but for me as well. We my family didn't do the traditional Thanksgiving. We decided to pack up and go to the beach. I always like to travel, so me and my wife and two of my kids and my in-laws, we rented a condo at Myrtle Beach, and man, right there where we stayed at, it seemed like we were the only ones there, which was really cool. So we didn't have to worry about bumping into anybody. Of course, we went out to instead of having Thanksgiving dinner, we went out to a couple places and enjoyed some seafood and steak one night, and then one night we had some chicken. So it was a fun time, and but now we're back to the recording our show, and we're right here talking about our show this week is Wrestle War 89. Jeff, one thing about this show that I thought about, before we get into it, not very often. Back in the 80s, did we ever have a major event that Ric Flair was a challenger other than Starrcade 83? It seemed like all the other ones, he was always the champion being chased. But here on this one, we got Ric Flair chasing the title against Ricky Steamboat.
Yeah, but I think he was the challenger in '87 as well at Starrcade.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Was very rare to see Ric Flair going into a pay-per-view without being the World Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah, very, very odd pairing. But anyway, fans, we're going to get into this podcast right now. We're talking Wrestle War 89 coming up next on the Binge Buster Show. Wrestle War 1989 Music City Showdown was the first Wrestle War pay-per-view produced by World Championship Wrestling under the National Wrestling Alliance banner It took place on May 7th, 1989, from the Nashville Municipal Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee, with the main event being Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, defending against Nature Boy Ric Flair. With a packed house of 5,200 fans, this is a story coming up next on the Binge Buster Show. All right, everyone, welcome to the Binge Buster Show. Wrestle War 89, Jeff. This show took place in Nashville, Tennessee. We're still kind of in the South in wrestling. WTBS, Ted Turner had actually purchased the NWA, and they're still in the process of changing over. So it's still it's being called World Championship Wrestling, but it's under the NWA banner. But we still have a lot of your classic NWA wrestlers are on this card. Some of the likes of Sting and Michael Hayes, Lex Luger, Ric Flair, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. So a lot of the normal NWA guys are still there, but we are, as we watch this show, we see that we're definitely in a change. So as this show starts off, our opening match, it will go 3 minutes, 3 seconds. One of my favorite wrestlers, the Great Muta, with his manager Gary Hart, taking on Doug Gilbert, the younger brother of Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, as Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert is at ringside. I think during this match there was a feud that was brewing between the Great Muta, Sting, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. Jeff, what are your memories on this match?
Great Muta, man, one of the most underrated wrestlers from back in the day. A lot of high flying and the mist. Love the mist, man. He got from his father Kabuki, and Doug Gilbert. I don't remember a whole lot about him, but Great Muta, and of course, very short match for the opening match of this pay-per-view. Yeah,
one of the things I remember seeing, I think it was at this one. Could be, but Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, I guess Muta had sprayed Missy Hyatt with the mist, and so I'm sorry, it wasn't actually at this show. It was at a Clash of Champions, but what had happened was Muta had sprayed the mist into Missy Hyatt's face, and so Eddie Gilbert was going to come out and get revenge. And of course, we always know from Eddie Gilbert got the nickname Hot Stuff. It wasn't just because he came out to the song, but he would throw fireballs at people. And so during one of the exhibition matches, so to speak, that when Muta first came in, he was going to take on 2 competitors. And anyway, Eddie Gilbert comes out to burn Muta and inadvertently burns one of the preliminary wrestlers. But it was really building this feud up between Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, Sting, and Great Muta. But man, the Great Muta, I mean, I can't say, I mean, he was definitely way beyond his time when he came out. And, first time we ever saw the moonsault, I think, at least for me, was from the Great Muta.
Yeah, totally agree. Just a great wrestler. I guess this was pre the Gary Hart days when Gary Hart came in and become his manager, or was he his manager at the time?
Yeah, he was. Matter of fact, Gary Hart was the one that brought the Great Muta to the NWA, and it was fitting because in the early '80s, '83, '84, Gary Hart was in Mid-Atlantic with the Great Kabuki. So why not? If he had Kabuki, then definitely he's going to bring Kabuki's son, the Great Muta. But man, Muta surpassed, to my opinion, any Japanese wrestler that's ever came to the United States. I don't think any of them could touch the Great Muta.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that one.
So moving on, our next match, Hacksaw Butch Reed and Ranger Ross, they go 6 minutes 59 seconds with Butch Reed getting the win. Here it's evident that Jim Crockett has went and purchased Mid-South, because here we got Butch Reed was a huge star in Mid-South. Now he's trying to find his way through the NWA. But I think this match right here against Ranger Ross, and Jeff, if you remember, when they first brought Ranger Ross in, man, they were trying to make him like the NWA Sergeant Slaughter. But he just didn't have, I don't know what it was that they tried to put him out there, but I don't think the fans were buying it.
No, I don't think so either. And I think I met him one time, or somebody I know met him and said he was a really super guy, but just he just didn't get the ovation that they was hoping for from the crowd. So really didn't get much of a push.
Yeah, but a pretty solid match, 6 minutes 59 seconds. I always liked Butch Reed. He was a great worker. He had a great body, good talker, just all around great heel. So this match was definitely definitely good and put in the right spot. Now moving on, this next match. Oh my goodness, I'm surprised. Like this day and time, I don't think that they would have been able to air this match on TV, but it's a bullrope match. Dirty Dick Murdoch and Bob Orton Jr. Again with Gary Hart. This match goes 4 minutes 54 seconds with, of course, Dick Murdoch wins, but there's a spot in this match where Bob Orton was hanging Dick Murdoch, like literally lynching him right there on national television on his pay-per-view. Jeff, you have memories or thoughts of this?
Definitely only 4 minutes in a bullrope match, man. That is awfully short. I mean, they must have been really pushing for time or something. Because especially with the solid working capabilities of these two guys and being ring veterans, being in the business a long time, and I always thought Bob Orton was Jr. was underrated. I don't think he ever really got the real credit that he was due. He was always somebody's second man, especially knowing he was in WWE. But and Dick Murdoch, man, I mean, there's a guy that crazy as he could be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he was something else. But I always liked Dick Murdoch, and I know I've talked about this before on other podcasts, but I was on YouTube one day. I was searching through promos, and I came across a whole bunch of Dick Murdoch promos, and he was on WTBS, and this was when he had came back to the NWA around '87, and he had turned on Dusty and joined up with Ivan and Vladimir Pietrov, and him and Ivan Koloff were the United States Tag Team Champions. But he was out on they were out on WTBS studios, and he was cutting a promo, and the fans were just giving him down the road. And I guess, in that little setting, I think that they might have had 100 people, but I don't think they even had 100. Probably more like 50 in there. 50 fans there in the studio. And I guess at some point in his promo, one of the fans must have said something. I don't know. But anyway, he says on national television, "Shut up, you bunch of kayfabers." And I thought that was the funniest thing ever. And I told one of my friends that makes T-shirts, I said, man, one of these days I'm going to get a T-shirt made with Dick Murdoch's face on it, and the back of it's going to say, "Shut up, you bunch of kayfabers." He said that shirt will sell like hotcakes. I said, yes, it will. So don't nobody steal my shirt out there listening to this podcast. That's going to be mine. I got it copyrighted. But man, Dick Murdoch, he was something else, and he could go and this match right here, 4 minutes and 54 seconds is one thing. But Jeff, I think you agree with me, and I'm sure at some point this month we'll probably cover this show. But in 1993, WCW had a new pay-per-view called Slamboree, a Legends Reunion, and they would bring in some of the older guys to come out and do a match. And you remember that, what I'm talking about, Jeff? It was Dick Murdoch against Chief Wahoo McDaniels, and Dick Murdoch does the prettiest flying head scissor you ever seen in your life. And I think it was Jesse Ventura. No, is it Jesse Ventura or Bobby Heenan? One of the two commented and said, "Oh my God, that was a beautiful flying head scissors. I cannot believe Murdoch got his stomach up that high." I thought that was the greatest thing I ever heard.
Yeah, that really shocked me. I remember watching that and seeing him do a flying head scissors, and I was just like, "Oh, did he just do a flying head scissors?" I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And I popped. I'm sure everybody else in the building. I'm sure the boys in the back were going nuts. And I was like, man, that was a beautiful head scissor that he done. Man, I miss old Dick Murdoch. He was a classic for sure. Now, moving on to our next match. This is a tag team match. Goes 11 minutes and 2 seconds. The Dynamic Dudes, Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas, taking on the Samoan SWAT team of Fatu and Samu with their manager Paulie Dangerously. Now, a few months earlier, Paulie Dangerously was deep into a feud with the Jim Cornette. Paulie had his version of the Midnight Express, and Jim Cornette had his version. And I'm very surprised that on this show that we're not seeing something with the Midnight Express, but I believe at this point they were looking to leave. They weren't happy by the way they were being used, but either event, they had a pay-per-view, I guess the last pay-per-view before this. It was the Midnight Express versus the original Midnight Express. Loser leaves the NWA. Dennis Condrey no shows, and because he got wind that that's what they were doing. And so he didn't want to give them the satisfaction of killing off his Midnight Express, so he didn't show up. So they end up putting in Jack Victory in his place. So it kind of took away from that whole feud, just buried the Midnight Express completely, both teams, in my opinion. So after that happened, Paul E has to go out and get a new team, and he gets the SST, Samoan SWAT team. Now, the first time I saw these guys was in World Class, just a few months prior to this, and they were insane. And for them to come to the NWA, I knew that they were definitely going to be a team to be watched. But the Dynamic Dudes, not so sure about this team. We got both guys were really never major stars, up until this point. And now they put them in this tag team and making them surfers, but instead of being surfers, they come out with skateboards. And they come out to the Fat Boys Wipeout song, so it was kind of comical, really. But I saw what they were doing there. They were using these guys to help turn the Midnight Express. I'm talking about Stan and Bobby back heels again with Cornette. But 11 minutes 2 seconds with Dynamic Dudes going over on this one. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you were talking about the Dynamic Dudes, how they were never stars. Johnny Ace was never a star, but Shane Douglas didn't become a star until he went to ECW.
Right, yes, what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And the Samoan SWAT team, I just never thought they got the push that they so rightfully deserved. I don't think they never held any titles. But again, we're talking about this the Jim Herd era, so nothing is a surprise. Because that guy didn't know. I mean, I still don't understand Ted Turner's philosophy on making a guy that owned a pizza shop to be your head man of a wrestling company. It's a head scratcher.
Yeah. Well, I think the key there was he came in and sold himself because at one time he was a stage manager for a television station that had Wrestling to the Chase. It was like a wrestling talk show, And I think at the time, Ted Turner was like, okay, I just bought the Crockett Promotions. It's in the red. I've got to figure out what I can do. And I guess because that TV show was so successful, I think Ted Turner probably thought that the success came from him, but evidently it was not him. It was other people involved. But thank God the Jim Herd era didn't last too long before it completely killed WCW, although it was very close. Now, the next match I was excited about because growing up I was always there were three teams in the 80s that I always marked out for, and I always said, if I ever become a wrestler, I'm going to be part of each of these teams, And those three teams that I always liked was always the Rock and Roll Express, the Midnight Express, and the Fabulous Freebirds. And here in 1989, the Freebirds surprisingly kind of broke up for a bit. Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts were still in World Class, and Michael Hayes had came back to the NWA as a singles competitor. And here he comes in and cuts a beautiful promo, has a beautiful robe. He's not wearing the typical Freebird Rebel flag robe, but he's got this beautiful blue and gold robe. But his manager is Hiro Matsuda, who actually replaced J.J. Dillon during this time as Ric Flair's manager. But here he is with Michael Hayes, and he's taking on Lex Luger, and surprisingly, Michael Hayes defeats Lex Luger, turns heel in this match, and becomes the United States champion, and defeats Lex Luger. This match goes 16 minutes and 6 seconds, and this was actually one of my favorite matches on this card. Jeff, what are your memories of Michael Hayes versus Lex Luger?
Yeah, I was kind of shocked, and I think I can't remember the finish, but I do know that Michael Hayes was against the ropes and Luger was laying on the mat, and Terry Gordy went and pushed him to make it look like he shoved Michael Hayes on top of Lex Luger for the pin. If I'm not mistaken, that's how this.
That's exactly what happened. They collided in a crisscross, and Michael Hayes, I believe, hit heads with Luger. Luger hits the mat, but Michael Hayes hits the ropes, and he's passed on the ropes, and Terry Gordy comes out and pushes Hayes on top. And that was actually Terry Gordy making his return to the NWA and rejoining the Freebirds, because for about a year, the Freebirds were actually against each other and feuded and had matches against each other there in World Class. So I was excited to see the Freebirds back together because, man, I always thought Terry Gordy and Michael Hayes had such good chemistry together, and they legitimately looked like they just, one had the other one's back 100%.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they were definitely heels. I mean, no doubt about it. Especially Michael Hayes with the way he could talk.
Oh yeah, man. There's a few people in this world that could cut a promo, and you believe what they were saying, and Michael Hayes was one of them, man. I love Michael Hayes promos. Terry Gordy was a good promo. One of my favorite Terry Gordy promos, and I played this before on the Binge Buster show, but it was when Terry Gordy, coming from World Class, Terry Gordy had a friend, Killer Khan, and Killer Khan, he was from the Orient, and he had turned on Terry Gordy and joined up with Devastation Incorporated. And back then, World Class, they would send Bill Mercer out on locations trying to find these wrestlers to do these promos, and he just so happens to find the Freebirds parked in the parking lot in their custom 1970s, Love Machine van, and so he's talking to Michael Hayes, and he's like, well, I want to get a word with Terry, and Michael Hayes is like, no, you don't want to talk to Terry right now. Terry's not, and leave that man alone. He is in a bad mood, and here, Bill Mercer goes, well, I just want to say one, ask Terry one thing, and he opens up the door of the van, and Terry comes out, and he's like, "Don't you put your hand," you know how Terry talked in that real country Chattanooga, Tennessee accent. He said, "Don't put your hands on my van," and he goes, "That van belongs to me." And then he goes, "If I want to put a dip of snuff in, I'll put a dip of snuff in." And he put a dip of snuff in, and he took a bump on the concrete, but he cut the most realistic promo I'd ever heard in my life. And man, I always loved the Freebirds. They were just bad dudes.
Yeah, they most definitely were. Great tag team, great 6-man as well with Buddy Roberts.
Yeah, they were definitely the innovators of a lot of things, in tag team wrestling and music. Wrestlers walk into the ring with music. So, Freebirds are going to be my top 3 tag teams of all time. Now, moving on, we have a match for the NWA World Television title. This match goes 2 minutes 2 seconds, as the champion Sting is taking on the Iron Sheik with Rip Morgan. This right here was a shocker to me to even see the Iron Sheik in the NWA, because he was such a big WWF guy. But not on top of that, taking on Sting, but this match going only 2 minutes 12 seconds. Of course, I know at this point they're really trying to build Sting up, but the Iron Sheik, he was a tough guy as well. And I remember during this time was my dad would bring me to the Greensboro Coliseum, and I remember us coming there one night and seeing the Iron Sheik taking on. It had to be around this time, but he took on Sting, and it was like the same thing. He got beat in like 3 minutes, there in Greensboro. But Sting and the Iron Sheik, what are your thoughts on this one, Jeff?
I mean, it's sad. I mean, here's a guy who was former WWF champion, or WWF champion, back when it was Worldwide Wrestling Federation. And, I mean, here he's at the tail end of his career, and pretty much doing jobs in 2 and 3 minutes. Just kind of sad. But it is what it is. That's what happens sometimes when they get to the end of their career.
Yeah, unfortunately. Now, the next 3 matches that we're going to talk about, I'm really blown away as far as the number that these matches transpired. But here we go. So the match that should have been the main event is now the 7th match on the card. Nature Boy Ric Flair taking on the champion for the NWA World title, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. This match will go 31 minutes 37 seconds with Ric Flair clean. Even though Flair's the heel, he beats Steamboat fair and square, clean, right in the middle. During 1989, Steamboat and Flair had a series of matches that just left you on the edge of your seat, and these guys were going 60, 90 minutes at a time and never doing the same moves twice. Man, Jeff, I could watch Steamboat Flair matches, every day of my life and learn. So during this time, they actually had 3 big matches. They had this one. They had the one where Steamboat won the title, and then they had the one where Steamboat was a champion on Clash of Champions, 2 out of 3 falls. Between those 3, Jeff, which one was your favorite?
It would have to be this one.
Yeah, mine too.
To be honest with you, and it was the match of the card. And again, it's like, who is booking this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because your world title needs to be the main event. Period.
Yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, if your world title is being defended, especially when you have, 2 of the 5 greatest workers that, performers that have ever been in the ring. I mean, they have to be the main event. And I mean, it's a head scratcher. What are these people thinking that are booking? But it was an unbelievable match, and I think they were getting ready to work uh, Flair in as a baby, if I'm not mistaken, so he could start his feud with Terry Funk.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
I'm not mistaken,
that's
that's why
exactly.
they had the clean pin. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened here. And I remember seeing an interview one time with Steamboat, and Steamboat said that nobody even told him what they were doing. As far as he knew, he was going to drop the world title back to Flair, clean pin, and he said he thought that maybe they would have a few more matches and trade the title off a couple more times, but instead they pretty much buried Steamboat right there. He got beat fair and square in the middle of the ring, and then Terry Funk, who hadn't wrestled in several years, they pretty much put him right in the spot that Steamboat had. So I think Steamboat was maybe not bitter, but definitely concerned as far as why that happened. And shortly after this, I think Steamboat went back to the WWF. But let's talk for a minute, Jeff, about the finish of this. We get Flair out there at ringside. He's cutting a promo with Jim Ross, and Terry Funk gets in the ring, and and then they go into this feud, and Flair and Terry Funk ends up hitting Ric Flair. And for the first time, I think, in the history of wrestling that I'd ever witnessed, anyways, a man getting pile driven through a table. And I remember I've saw interviews before with Ric Flair, and he told Terry, when Terry told him that he was going to do it, and he's like, "What? Are you kidding me? You're going to kill us both?" And he said, Terry Funk said, "No, it's going to work. We're going to draw a lot of money with this." And I think they did. But Jeff, your thoughts. I mean, from Steamboat's perspective, how do you go from being having three of the best matches on that everybody talks about being the best matches of all time, to all of a sudden someone who really hadn't had a big run since probably the late '70s, early '80s. It almost makes you feel like Steamboat kind of felt like he had a slap in the face.
Well, I can just sum it up with two words: Jim Hurd.
Yeah.
I mean, a complete idiot. I mean, if I was sit down and tell you the five worst bookers or people that have had a share as far as running a wrestling company, Jim Hurd would be one of the top five, no doubt about it. But I mean, he just had no clue what he was doing. And I mean, when you're trying to get Ric Flair, who was one of the greatest performers in the history of pro wrestling, and trying to turn him into Spartacus, I mean, come on, man. I mean, and what he did they did to Ricky Steamboat. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, here's a guy who, like we said before, one of the greatest performers to ever be in the ring, and one of the greatest baby faces of all time. And and just okay, you're gone, you're out of here, and we're gonna push Funk now. I mean, really? I mean, no offense, Funk was good, but he wasn't Ricky Steamboat.
Right. For sure. I mean, he was a former world champion, but that was in the '70s, and now here we are, almost 20 years later. Because this is 1989, we're getting ready to go into the '90s. But Flair and Funk will have a pretty good feud, have a nice little run. Of course, it finishes off. The blow off is the I Quit match that didn't even hold not even a candle. It didn't even hold a flashlight to Magnum and Tully Blanchard's. But in the event, here we are, going into a new feud, a new decade. Just a few months later after this. But now we're all scratching our head because you're thinking, okay, this is it. And I remember watching this pay-per-view going, wait a minute, I know there's a couple other matches. Why? And then here we go. The next match after what should have been the main event, we got the Road Warriors with Paul Ellering taking on the Varsity Club For the World Tag Team titles. And in this match, Nikita Koloff is a special guest referee. This match will go 6 minutes, 6 seconds with the Road Warriors defeating the champions, the Varsity Club. And it's almost like when the Road Warriors won the tag team titles, the fans didn't even care at this point, because the NWA was in such turmoil. And I mean, you think about it, we talk Starrcade, just think about this for just a minute. 1985, Starrcade is drawing 10,000 people. 4 years later, in 1989, they barely are drawing 5,000 people. So they got half of what they were drawing, just 4 years earlier. So it's kind of a sad state that the NWA is in at this point. But now to see, the Road Warriors, become heels, and it was just one of those things where the people just didn't really care. Then we go from this match. Before we get there, I want to get your opinion. What are your thoughts of the Road Warriors finally winning the World Tag Team titles?
It was long overdue. They should have won them at Starrcade '87 in Chicago, but that didn't happen. But only 6-minute match. That's hard to believe. But after you had a world title match that went 31 minutes, just crazy booking.
Yeah, it makes no sense. And then I guess the final match, which was their main event, we got Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert and Rick Steiner with Missy Hyatt taking on the other portion of the Varsity Club, Dangerous Dan Spivey and Kevin Sullivan. And this match is for the United States Tag Team titles. Now we got the U.S. titles as the main event on this show. 6 minutes, 41 seconds with Eddie Gilbert and Rick Steiner. They are the current U.S. Tag Team champions, and they defeat the challengers of the Varsity Club, Dan Spivey and Kevin Sullivan. Man, I just can't even fathom the booking of this. How they put the world title 7th in, and now we've got United States tag titles where there's really not even no feud going on there. What are your thoughts, Jeff?
Kevin Sullivan and Dan Spivey. I'm sorry, that's just not a main event, man. I mean, that might be a main event in like a town where they used to do TV taping, I mean, but man, a main event at a pay-per-view is, again, just terrible booking. I mean, it's no wonder they were going downhill. And it's just like, who's running this show? I mean, it's just crazy. But and I mean, you think about it. I mean, they still had a lot of talent on their roster. I mean, they had a young Rick Steiner, they had a young Sting. Luger was still getting over. You had Michael Hayes, you had the Road Warriors, you had Ric Flair, Rick Steamboat, and to only draw 5,000 fans. In Nashville, Tennessee, which is
a huge wrestling town.
Which it's not too far from North Carolina, which you could get people that go to Greensboro and Charlotte would drive to Nashville to see the pay-per-view. It's kind of hard to believe that they only drew 5,000 fans. Yeah,
that was the biggest shock to me as well. But all in all, if we're going to pick the top two matches on this card, it's definitely going to be Michael Hayes and Luger and Flair and Steamboat. Those two are my picks. It is what it is. But the good thing is, next week's podcast we're gonna have definitely have a lot of fun. And I know this next show that we're going to talk about on the next podcast, I remember when I heard the show was coming, I was like, oh man, I can't wait to see this. And you and I had just met actually, I don't think that you and I had quite met yet, maybe a month out or something. But next week's podcast, fans, we're going to be talking Slamboree 93, a Legends reunion, coming to you from the Omni in Atlanta. I'm excited about this one because we get to see a lot of great matches, and we get to see one of the matches that I thought this was going to be the one for the NWA World Champion, the champion Barry Windham taking on a former Horseman partner and Arn Anderson. And Arn Anderson as a babyface really got me on this one. But we got a ton of matches to talk about on this one. Jeff, what are your thoughts on next week's podcast?
Sounds like it's going to be a blast. Can't wait to do that one, and I'll be doing my research to find out what all happened on this event.
Yeah, I remember when this one first came out, I was so excited because I'm always one with about the old guys. I mean, I say old guys, I don't call them old, but the legends. And I think that when WCW came out with this was definitely a great way to pay homage and pay respect to the ones that paved the way for everyone else. So that's coming up next week. Fans, Chris isn't with us this week. He's on location working on some stuff for the Binge Buster show, but he'll be back next week, and he and I and Jeff will be talking Slamboree 93, and also my favorite match. Trying to not let the cat out of the bag, but my favorite match on next week's show is going to be a cage match. Hollywood Blondes, Brian Pillman and Steve Austin taking on Dos Hombres, and we later find out that it's Ricky Steamboat and Tom Zink, but the fans are led to believe that it's Ricky Steamboat and Shane Douglas. But we'll get into that next week on the Binge Buster show. Chris will be back next week. Jeff, you have anything before we go off the air today?
No, Wrestle War was a pretty good event. I mean, I give it maybe a 6 out of 10 just because of the Flair Steamboat match.
Yeah,
that gets
fair.
5 out of 10 right there for you. And then the rest of the show is kind of just nothing really spectacular. Maybe Luger and Michael Hayes, but the rest of it was just matches kind of thrown together.
Yep, for sure. Unfortunately. Well, fans, thank you for joining us this week on the Binge Buster show, and we look forward to talking to you next week. Until then, I'm Tony Binge for Jeff Patton. We'll see you next week on the Binge Buster show.
Thank you for listening to the Binge Buster show. Make sure you like us on Facebook and download us on your favorite podcast platform.